Okay, I think I heard a hi, right? Did you hear a hi? No, nothing? Uh-oh, did we lose Grant over here? Did we lose Grant? Okay, well, we'll see if we can get Grant back, and if not, then we'll just have to do it without Grant. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, so what I'm hoping to do today is share with us an effort basically to automate the management and creation of a lot of our Jenkins jobs here. Okay, maybe just the volume or something. We'll see. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll do the best we can. It shows he's still connected, but that's okay. Anyway, so we're here to talk about just an initiative we call JenkinsOps, where we are streamlining how we manage our Jenkins jobs. I'm going to kind of just introduce the reason why we set about doing this work, and then Grant, if he's still available, or me if he's not, will kind of get into some of the nitty-gritty, some of the how we did this part of the talk. And then hopefully we'll wrap up with some challenges we faced and lessons learned and that sort of thing. And kind of an aside to that is just there's been so much great content at this conference so far. One thing, our goal really was that you walk out of here with maybe some new ideas of things you might be able to try with your Jenkins implementation. But I've quickly come to realize that we're probably not even necessarily the experts, and there might be a lot of better ways to do things, and especially with some of the new Blue Ocean, was it Blue Ocean or whatever it's called, the blue stuff coming out. That's going to be a really interesting dynamics for sure. So anyway, let's get started. So. There's one audience interaction part to this here. Who has heard of NPR before? Okay, and keep your hands up if you have visited our website before. Okay, good show of hands. Keep your hands up if you use an application called NPR One. Oh, where did all the hands go? Come on, there's like 3 or 4 out there. Anyway, that's a relatively new application of ours. So just to kind of quickly introduce what we do, I mean, everyone's heard of NPR on the radio pretty much, but we have our digital media presence at NPR is growing quite substantially now. NPR.org, our website, pictured there on the left, NPR One, which is a new like Pandora for public radio. People hate when I say that, but that's the easiest way I can introduce a new app. That's one of our apps that we maintain. One thing that's not really pictured here are the APIs that kind of power it. So we have APIs that take content in from partner, like member stations and other partners. We also have APIs that supply the data, both for our own apps and apps that people write. So let's get into a little bit more about digital media and who we are and kind of what we do. We've been basically, digital media as a team has been around for at least about 10 years or so at NPR. It's been a rapidly growing thing. Digital media has been an ever-increasing presence for us, just in terms of how we engage with our audiences. Podcasting has been like a big growth area for us as well, and there's a big component of that we handle through digital media. We have record-setting growth. We have 75 million story views a month on our main website. So it's been growing like crazy. And like anything, this is a story about doing the right things with software that's basically 10 years old. We've started as a smaller team, maybe of 3 or 4 developers, and in particularly the last 3 years, about 3 years, we've grown. And now we have 18 developers, and then there's a variety of other staff that make up our team. So now we have 6 or 7 teams that are working all the time on like our primary code bases, which serve our website, our API, and our content management system. So we have a lot of initiatives going on right now around scale, the separation of services into like different code, that sort of thing. And of course, like the DevOps theme, continuous deployment theme that's like really pervasive at Jenkins World, we are trying to do that. We want to release software more frequently and more reliably. So what this has kind of culminated in is just, we're like really bent on getting our testing situation kind of under control right now. That's like a huge enabler to basically everything that we want to do with going into the future. So let's break that down a little bit here before getting into the more fun stuff. So who here has seen that diagram or one like it? It's another audience interaction part. Okay, so a few people have seen it. I don't know, maybe 20% of the hands. It's actually hard to see the hands in here. This is the classic Agile testing pyramid from Michael Kahn, I believe. Succeeding with Agile was the book where this triangle first made its appearance. And so in any code base, you want a lot of unit tests. Those sort of form like the base of your pyramid. You want as many of them as you can. That's going to be the bulk of your testing. You're going to have a lot of unit tests. They're supposed to run really quick. Ideally, you'd run them using Jenkins on every commit. Now, in the middle, you have your service or API tests, that kind of sit there, and they're doing a little bit more in terms of like business workflows and things like that. Those might talk to a database, some other APIs, different components, that sort of thing. And then at the top of your test pyramid are your UI tests, kind of frequently conflated or whatever with end-to-end tests. These are the types of tests, like, so in NPR's case, if you use our CMS to publish a story, you want to see it in the API, on the website, in the NPR One mobile application. So let's start with the top of the pyramid here. We've been investing a lot in this. This was like our first area of investment. So when you have legacy code bases where legacy code is defined as code without tests, right? So where a good place to start if you're in a situation where you're trying to improve your testing is to start at the top. So that's kind of what we did. That was maybe more like if I were here last year, I'd give a whole presentation on that presentation. But we are using Selenium, a very common tool. Probably everyone's heard of Selenium here to do a lot of our automated UI tests. And we're also using an interesting tool called Rainforest, and they actually have a booth out here. They're one of the people on the floor. Actually, they're like right outside this door right here. So they're an on-demand testing service where you can enter your tests in plain English and set them up to run in different browsers, and then they have multiple testers that will run through the test scenario and kind of give you a pass-fail. It's a really quick way of adding tests, and you don't necessarily need to get into like Selenium and all the test automation engineering that goes with that. So, like I mentioned, we were really focused on that a little while ago. Now what we're trying to do is really pay more attention to these lower levels of the pyramid and kind of work on, not addressing, but like improving and beefing up and being better about our service and unit tests here that form the lower two levels of this pyramid. And so we're in classic. We use the classic tools, I guess, more as harnesses in a lot of cases. But JUnit and PHPUnit are like the main tools we use. There's one other really important tool, though, that we use. Probably everyone know what it is? Yeah, right. Jenkins is like the center of all of it. So no matter what type of test it is, and no matter what spot it is in this pyramid, that's the one. That's the center of the show. So. Okay, switching gears a little bit now. So in our environments, we kind of have this notion of where we have like a development, like a CI environment, and we have a collection of Jenkins jobs that are going with it, and the very simplified illustration, obviously. But and then we have like a UAT environment, and that's the one that's at the end of our sprint we deploy the code there and make sure it still works, and then eventually ship it out to production. And so we're maintaining these Jenkins jobs on a couple a couple of these environments, and we're adding getting all of our tests running and doing everything. No big deal. But like now, what we're trying to do, now we're up to 7 teams operating all at the same time on the same code bases, and so now we're kind of moving in a direction where we're getting into feature branches, and then what we want is to have CI for a feature branch, so you can deploy your code there and run all your tests there and all of that. And it's kind of gotten really crazy and big, and a lot to maintain. So now what we quickly discovered is we're having like this maintainability issue around our Jenkins jobs. So what we ended up saying, okay, we need to figure this out. We have this problem where we can't get all of these jobs running and organized and straightened out and all that kind of thing. So we need to figure this out. So we have JenkinsOps to the rescue. And how we got to JenkinsOps is, actually going back to this slide really quickly, we had a big push to take all of our environment management and put that under Chef, and that was sort of all under DevOps. So we needed a new name for a new effort to kind of deal with the Jenkins side of it. I was actually just at a talk earlier where you have to come up with ways to sell this stuff to the business. So that was sort of our sales pitch. So JenkinsOps. Feel free to reuse it. It's not a patented term or anything like that. So now that we got into JenkinsOps, this is where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into kind of what we did and what some of the plugins we used are. So let's take a chance here and see if Grant made it back. Hey, Grant, say something if you're here. That's kind of weird. This is, yeah, I know. Okay, last chance for Grant. I don't think we have Grant, so that's okay. We will carry on without Grant. But he's still listening, though, and I'm sure he's going to be like, you said all of this very wrong compared to how I would have said it. But that's okay. We'll do the best we can. And the good news is that you can always talk to Grant later if you really want to. So anyway, let's see here. So into the phase 2 of the presentation. So just going to quickly walk people through a little bit about how we build and like what our pipeline looks like, since pipeline is the new theme of the conference, it seems like. A quick modeling of it is basically we have our code base here in GitHub, and we have a build job basically that's set to pull the code base and look for changes. Anytime somebody pushes, we take the code. We run a job that will update, basically the build job will run, will basically create a package that's deployable somewhere. We have an update job which will take that package and basically put it on a staging server and start Apache, all that kind of stuff for people to use. So now for the testing, we kind of created like an additional collection of things that Jenkins now is going to do. So we have this new, what we call a master job, and you're going to hear a lot more about that. What it's going to do is basically maintain and then run a large number, way more than 8, but a large number of unit and integration tests against that environment that was just deployed to. So now let's get a little bit more into, now that you kind of see like the model of our pipeline, let's talk about, all right, so now we're looking into kind of solving this problem with large numbers of jobs and all that, and this maintenance headache of it. We have some requirements here that we needed to make sure that we covered. We want there to be comprehensive reporting of each of our test jobs. one thing to be really clear is we don't have a situation. I know a lot of teams use Jenkins in this way. We don't have a situation where you just run like all of your tests for like the whole entire code base in like one one step of the build. We have, I believe it was around 175 different test jobs that we run against every environment. So we really like that reporting that comes with it because the different tests are covering different pieces of the code, and we're able to have this picture or like history of a test that runs against a certain environment. So we really like this high level of verbosity that you get with that kind of testing because you can isolate things like, does it fail on every environment or just one environment, and like what's like the track record of a given set of tests. So that works out really good. And then because of the nature of the code base being so integrated, basically almost everything for the web and our website and APIs are in one code base. It's helpful to have some separation of the tests, because otherwise you'd have a test report that's like a mile long. So we wanted to have this separate, we wanted to maintain the separate test jobs as a part of this, rather than merge them into one. And then what we really want to do is come up with this dynamic way of creating tests. So if developers are creating code branches and then saying we want to deploy it onto like the server over here, we want to have a set of jobs that go with that, as I just mentioned. But what we want to do is if a developer adds new tests or refactors tests and removes tests, we want the Jenkins part to kind of keep up with that, and we want all that to be automated as a part of that. So that's where we get a little bit more into the weeds in a few more slides. And notifications are it ended up kind of being a quote unquote late requirement, but we moved to Slack like the rest of the world and dumped HipChat. And we quickly realized that we needed to have a good way to tell the right team that, hey, there's a test on your branch that's failing. Go look at it without spamming the whole department. Here's a quick screenshot. Oh, try clicking one more time. Okay, there we go. Here's a screenshot just of like what one little microcosm of this looks like. So you can see here for just one environment, this one's called stage 4. We have one collection of tests that are here, and you can see all their jobs that are configured for it. So that's an example of like the output we're looking for. You can see the weather of all the tests for that particular thing, and it's nice to have that breakdown, I think, even though there's certainly a lot more jobs. So plugins for this. So you should know that. You should know that there's so many great plugins out there, and I was just at a session just a minute ago. I don't know his name, but he works at Verizon, and now I have like a list of like 10 more plugins that are like really awesome. It's crazy how many plugins there are for Jenkins. But we've been nurturing and growing our Jenkins environment for a number of years, and we found a lot of good plugins for job organization. So before we get into the whole job creation part, I'll take a minute to just kind of introduce the plugins we found that are good at organizing things. So there's the multi-job plugin, which is a good way to sort of like organize a collection of jobs that need to run together. You can set concurrency requirements for them, and then you can sort of like bucket them. I don't really know how to describe it, and I wish I had a screenshot here, which I don't. But you can have like a setup job that you run, and then if that passes, it can like spawn other jobs and kind of do that. And that's really useful for situations like those tests at the top of the triangle. That's a really good thing. We do like setup for to set up a certain condition before we run our UI test against it. That's really handy for that. Putting jobs into folders is great because everybody hates that I don't know if anyone's worked with a lot of jobs in a Jenkins server instance like that, but if you visit like the home page and it just like takes forever to load, it's good to be able to have jobs not do that. The custom, custom views and nested views are really helpful as well. You can set regular expressions to show views that match a certain name, or jobs that show a certain name. And then the nested view is just another way to drill in and navigate into test results. So that's all fine and dandy, and we kind of got down this path of, well, we could write I think we actually kind of did do this for a while. We can write a little program that'll just go through and kind of create a view and put some jobs in it, and we kind of got by with that, but then we said, okay, well, what we really need to be doing is using the Jobs DSL plugin. Anyone here use that? No? Yes? Okay, a couple of people. That is definitely a pretty cool plugin, because what we basically went back to the drawing board with this, and we're like, okay, if we're gonna automatically do all of this stuff, what's like the real right way to do it? I mean, we're writing a script that's going to do it, but maybe there's like a better way to do it. So we discovered, I'm not sure exactly how we came to discover it, but Netflix has been doing a lot with this plugin, and so we said, okay, what are they doing? And let's figure out what that is. And so we kind of stole a page out of their playbook, and we ended up doing the same thing, basically, where we are basically using a plugin that will run Groovy code effectively. And this Groovy code, and we'll kind of talk a little bit more about what it does, it'll basically just create a whole bunch of jobs for you. So like now, if our Jenkins server were to go away, I actually had an interesting conversation with some people at lunch about this. If our Jenkins server went away, we would basically be able to pretty quickly recreate all of our jobs, basically, because now we have the script that creates all the jobs in source control, thanks to this mechanism. Okay, so, all right. Okay, and sorry, I did not advance the slide, but before I move on from this one, I think the slides will be shared later, but there is a gist of this full code. We really can't get into the full code here. Otherwise, it would probably take all day. So if you want to visit it, you can see the link there. And then, so what does this Groovy code do? Well, bless you. We are, again, this is our website code base, which is living and breathing on our build server. We have all of our tests now neatly organized into a QA folder. And we're primarily a PHP shop, but we have some Java stuff as well. But these are pretty classic, just tests inside of a folder within QA. So we have another job here, which will basically take a copy of this, and then it will run a job which will just kind of based on some configuration parameters that you can kind of set up for this, like what environment it's going to run on, and some other things. We will actually then launch a job that will create this like kind of parent view, top level view here for an environment. In this case, we're calling it stage 1, and it's our website code. And then it'll also create a whole bunch of tests here as well. And those tests in the view will be governed by this master job that kind of gets populated in the middle. So another way to kind of take a look at this here, an alternate display of it, which kind of puts the whole picture together. We build and deploy to the server, then we end up on actually we have a separate Jenkins server called the Jenkins, just a different Jenkins instance that basically handles this part of it. But it maintains all of these maintains this master job, which will then create all of the test jobs if they haven't been created yet, or it'll also delete jobs if they don't need to be there anymore. And then it will just run all of the tests, and those tests run against the staging server. Okay, so, okay, and then, okay, each folder is self-contained. So something that was kind of brought up in the blue ocean, I keep calling it blue ocean. I feel like I might be wrong, but Something that was brought up in the Blue Ocean thing is that there's no good like navigation tool like in the pipeline view for like for separate teams to kind of work like in their own area. Something that they're working on developing in terms of UI. That was a really important requirement for us. So we actually went through a lot of work to make sure that we have folders that have everything there that a given team needs so they can see how their code is doing. So far, what we've accomplished is getting all of the tests to be in one good spot. Something we still need to work on is the builds themselves, but there's a zillion things we could do, for sure. Like anything, it's always an ongoing effort. So, okay. And I'm actually going to skip to the illustration here, because I think that makes it a little bit easier to follow. I'll show you what that looks like here. Okay, good. This screen here is the master job that gets called by the build server when it's time to run the tests. That's what will be called, and then that will then in turn run all of those tests independently. It'll spawn them off and run them all concurrently. It'll put a bazillion things on the build queue and run them all, and then report back. And then in the middle of that there, what we conveniently skipped are the jobs that do this file traversal and will discover new tests and add them to that view you just saw, or delete ones that are no longer there. So that's kind of how it all pieces together. Okay. So now we're done with that part. So how did it go? And now what? So we definitely faced a lot of challenges here in doing this, and I think they're kind of fun and interesting to talk about. So for anyone we had a lot of, this is just more of like a shift in what's going on with NPR now that we're becoming a bigger team and just trying to do things better. We had a lot of tests that were created but just never run before. I don't know if anyone's really encountered that in their travels. No one, right? Right. Perfect world out there. So we had a lot of these tests that were just kind of hanging out, and at first we're like, oh, let's just run them all, and then when they fail, we'll just spam the whole Slack channel, like, hey, these tests are failing. That didn't really go so well, right? Because now everyone's like, you're blowing up Slack, and that's not my test, and I don't want to deal with it, right? It turned out that this was kind of like a relic of, relic, I shouldn't say a strong term like that, but a decision was made at the time to just kind of have someone run and nurture the tests, and they would be like, okay, we're getting ready to do QA now, and I'm going to run these tests, and if there's something wrong, I'll let you know. You know, that was kind of like how it used to work. And so like this is kind of like a paradigm shift where now like everyone's kind of getting the feedback about their tests, and they're going to have to go in and fix them if they see any issues. So it's just a little bit of a different challenge, and I think if you're ever in a similar situation with that, just being aware of, kind of like that change in mindset about who's responsible for what parts of the system, and then it's more of a shared responsibility. So environment issues are definitely a problem too, especially when you're trying to both just create new environments, if you're doing any kind of branching or feature branch type of development where you want to do that, and in a situation where you're running tests, because you got to make sure like databases are in sync, and caching and all kinds of other stuff is kind of configured the same. And that's always an ongoing challenge, and I think where the real issue lies is knowing when to say, okay, we're engineering this around an environment issue that we should try to solve. And because you want to make everything be as production-like as possible as early as possible, right? But like you can't do that, so it's like, where do you draw the line there, And that's pretty tricky. And I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but just, culture. One thing that worked really well for us is we ended up, I think, in a situation where we were maybe expecting more of a cultural shift than we thought we would or cultural like pushback or whatever. But actually, people have taken to it really well, and they really want these tests to run on their environment, and they're starting to get really used to the feedback. So it's always kind of like part carrot, part stick. We want the feedback, but also there's, this is the like quote unquote right way to do things. A couple more challenges here. Oh, let me advance. Okay, just like, oops. So we have a job that deletes tests that no longer exist. And then what happens, if there's some kind of glitch, and then it's like, oh, there's no tests anymore. I'm going to delete all the jobs. Oops. So that's kind of fun. We kind of learned is we actually have to sort of source control our own code if we're kind of treating Jenkins like code, or it's code that does stuff and it has its own bugs, right? So now we have to worry about that. And then finally, the usual Jenkins scale kind of stuff. When you start having hundreds and hundreds of jobs, you run into that. Some kind of, implicit oopsies, I guess, is, parameterization of it was a little bit of a challenge too. We all know the Jenkins UI isn't maybe the best UI in the world, and it can get a little bit clumsy to know your way around in there. So, just training. We did a lot of show and tells. Blog, like we have an internal blog for this kind of stuff, internal blog posts, that sort of thing. It's kind of helped get developers used to it and kind of into the Jenkins fold here. So some future work. Where are we going to go next? I kind of wanted to rewrite this slide after all the presentations today so far, because I already have like a ton of new ideas, but I didn't. So anyway, we have to do more on the DevOps side with orchestration of things, but we really want Jenkins to one click, not just create our test jobs and our build jobs, but also to create the environment itself that that code would get deployed on, like the environment under test. That would be kind of cool if we could do that without having to call our sysadmins and be like, hey, we need another server for this. That would be kind of neat. And then something called ChatOps is kind of neat. Wouldn't it be nice if a test fails, if you could claim the test in Slack? And we use the claims plugin, so we know who's responsible for a failing test. Wouldn't that be kind of cool if you could just reply in Slack? Like if Slack said, hey, there's a failing test, and it looks like your code commit may have been the one that caused that test to fail. And then you could reply and say, like, got it or something, and then it could assign it to you as like your test to fix. That would be kind of a neat thing to do. And then ChatOps is kind of something we're exploring in general, like, hey, redeploy this thing or restart Apache or whatever. That would be kind of cool if you could just do that in your Slack channel or something like that. So those are some ideas for future work. Obviously, something that's missing is, hey, upgrade to Jenkins 2 and check out the pipeline work, since that's really come a long way. We looked at pipeline stuff a while ago, and maybe it was just the maturity level of it at the time, and our use case, it didn't really fit, but it looks really cool. So we definitely will look into that as well. Let's see here. One more slide. We're getting near the end, and we'll have a little bit of time for questions, which is good. Maybe 10 minutes or so before the birds of a feather thing starts up. But I just wanted to put a face to a name for Grant. And Grant worked really hard on this. Unfortunately, we can't hear him, but he can hear us. So clap extra loud at the very end. So he knows how much you appreciate his hard work on this presentation as well. But anyway, if you want to get in touch with us, please feel free to do so. Those are our Twitter handles there. I didn't put our email address on there because I didn't really know where this was going to end up, and I didn't want it to get scraped, and I already get enough junk mail as it is, but it's first initial last name at npr.org if you wanted to email us or talk to us. I'll be around after. I'll be around for the whole conference too, and I'm happy to talk more. But we do, like I said, I think we have 8 extra minutes left. If anyone has any questions or anything they want to ask, I will try to look for your hand in these lights. Yes? Okay, so the question was, how do you handle sonar and code coverage in our testing? So about that, we are doing some work with code coverage right now, and so this is a little bit of a fledgling effort for us right now. We are doing a little bit of code coverage on our product line, on a different product line that doesn't really have the same kind of job system built into it yet. And we're also doing it on our JavaScript level, like unit tests, like our front end unit tests. And those actually run before, so we actually generate JavaScript with Webpack. And so those actually kind of run like before that part of the build process goes. So there's actually a part of our build that fails like really, really early if those unit tests fail. And then we actually generate a coverage report at that time for those types of tests. So something with Sonar that really irks me is it doesn't have the greatest branch support like built into it. So it kind of makes it difficult. Like if an issue in Sonar is created on, let's say, on a feature branch, and then you close the feature branch in, the way it works in Sonar is it's actually a separate project. And then like the issue gets re-reported again, like in the master line. And I don't know, we've actually been looking at some tools called like Code Climate and other things that can integrate into Jenkins that do a little bit of a better job at handling that, and they actually just pull their own copy of the code and run analysis and track issues like in their own database. So yeah, we're not really, yeah, we've been playing with Sonar, but we're not really using Sonar. So anyway, I hope that answers that question. Yeah, a lot of those, that's a good question. And it's an easy detail to kind of miss, but like that one screen, I have to go way back, but that's actually not just one test. I mean, that's actually like a collection of tests. So it's probably, I don't know actually what the total count is. I probably should have known before this, but it's got to be well into the thousands. But there's about 175 jobs that kind of make that up. And so that's kind of how it's broken up is by module. Yeah, we didn't go that crazy, that deep into it. So the question is the number, 5 minutes, okay. The question was the number of executors on the master and slave. So that's actually a pain point we're working on right now. We have basically like maxed out like the Jenkins VMs that we have. And we're in the process now of setting up some more slave nodes and things like that. There's definitely like little glitches that kind of get us from time to time, like where, we're calling a job from one Jenkins server to another, and then it never gets like, hey, this is done now. Oops, kind of dealing with that sort of thing. So yeah, that's something that's under active development for us is that, yeah. Oh, yeah, we were going down the process. We have something called Serendipity Day, which is like a fun time where you get to just work on a side project for 3 days. It's not a hackathon, but because it's for the whole department and not everyone does programming. But yeah, that's kind of as far as we've gotten with it, where we wrote like our own little bot and kind of set that up. So yeah, there's probably one out there. We should probably look into that, and I'm sure somebody wrote one, but yeah, we'll do that. Okay. Any other questions? People are leaving, so I guess everyone's like, oh, I'm out of here. Any other questions though? I will be around at the networking event later and throughout the whole conference. If anyone wants to talk to me, or if anyone has any ideas on how to do things better, again, like I said, that would be cool to hear. And I guess we're done then. All right, thanks everyone.